Hi everyone, it's Steph here if you don't already know, and this is Success with Steph Explained, a mini-series where I take different practice areas and the typical deals that are involved and break them down so that you can understand what work is typically done and what work we as trainees do on these deals. Now in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at asset financing, and I'm going to be talking through what a definition of asset financing is, a little example of how asset financing works in practice, and then of course, what tasks trainees typically do on an asset financing deal. So please do remember to like, comment and subscribe if you like these bite-sized videos, and comment down below if there's any other particular deal type that you'd like me to explain for you. So what exactly is asset financing? Well, as usual, in our really simple examples, we're going to have our two key parties, our lender and our borrower. And in this particular type of financing, we've also got our asset underneath here, which for the purposes of this example is just going to be a ship. So we've got our lender lending our borrower a sum of money in order to purchase this ship, which is the asset. Now, asset financing occurs when, for this type of lending or loan to take place, the lender is also going to take security over the asset. So generally speaking, there are actually two different types of asset financing. You can have secured asset financing. So that's where we look at security, kind of like what we spoke about in our acquisition financing video. And you can also have a hire purchase lease type of deal. Now, I'm not going to be talking about a hire purchase lease type of deal purely because I haven't actually done one. I've only done secured lending. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And for secured lending asset financing, we've got our lender loaning a sum of money to our borrower in order to purchase this asset. And when they do that, they take security over the asset. So what documents are going to be involved in this type of deal? Now, because this is a typical form of financing, we are obviously going to have our facility agreement. In this type of scenario, it's likely just going to be a senior facilities agreement. So that's your bog standard facility agreement, which is our general loan document, which is governing the terms of how much the lender is going to provide to the borrower in order to acquire this asset. Now, in terms of what the trainee may be doing here, the trainee is highly unlikely to actually be drafting the facility agreement, though if the trainee has had experience in this sort of area before, then the trainee might be able to have a go with that. Where the trainee is likely to be getting involved is with the conditions precedent, which are often found at one of the schedules of the agreement. And remember, in one of my previous videos where I spoke about the typical types of deals I have done in the debt finance department, I spoke about something called a CP checklist. Well, that CP checklist is going to be created from the conditions precedent to the facility agreement. So it's very likely that the trainee, if they're on the lender side, of course, is going to be creating a CP checklist based off of the conditions precedent in the senior facility agreement. So the next type of senior document you might have to deal with is obviously the intercreditor agreement. Now, I say obviously because typically speaking, in the majority of your financing deals, there are going to be some documents which are just the same throughout. You're always going to have some type of facility agreement. You're always going to have some type of intercreditor agreement. And why is that? Well, if you remember from my previous video when I looked at acquisition financing, I explained that the intercreditor agreement is primarily there to govern the order of priority in the event of insolvency. Now, whenever you're loaning money, that is an event that you want to make sure you've got covered. So there's always going to be some kind of intercreditor agreement. So I'm not going to go over that again in this video. Again, just like with the acquisition financing video I did, in this type of asset financing deal, you are likely going to have some kind of security document, especially because if you remember the definition that I said at the beginning, this type of financing occurs when the lender provides the borrower with a sum of money in order to acquire an asset, and the lender takes security over said asset. So there's definitely going to be a security document. Now, just for your knowledge and information, typically under English law, the security document that we're going to be looking at is a debenture. However, do just be aware that if this particular document isn't actually governed by English law, or if the security is being taken in another jurisdiction, then it's going to be the security document that is relevant to said jurisdiction. It's still important for the trainee to understand this document and know how to navigate it, because when we get to our MRO1 filings, which I'm going to look at the end, you are still going to need to be able to navigate that document. But just know that for the purposes of English law, your document is typically going to be called a debenture. Now, I mentioned earlier that the trainee is typically going to be involved in what's known as the MRO1 filings. Now, this isn't actually a document to the deal per se, But under English law, once you have taken security, you also have to perfect security in order for that security to be valid. And by perfecting, that essentially just means making sure that you register that security on Companies House within the deadline that is specified. Now, in our case, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be something called an MR01 form. And that MR01 form needs to be filed at Companies House within 21 days of the date of creation of said charge. Those 21 days includes bank holidays, weekends, you name it, whatever kind of objection we would normally try to have, it's all included in the 21 days. So generally speaking, most trainees are going to try and get that MO01 form filled straight away as soon as the charge is created, so that if there are any issues at Companies House, then that can be rectified well within the 21-day time frame. Now, remember I also said that under English law, your typical security document is going to be something called a debenture. And it's really important for the purposes of filling out this MR01 form that you actually understand how to read a debenture. Why is that? Well, in order for you to fill out this debenture, you're going to have to, at the bottom of the form, fill out a couple of things. First of all, you'll need to include a brief description, and this brief description is supposed to ask you to fill out any information with regards to whether there's any security taken over land, airship, or intellectual property, I believe. Now, there's a way that you are meant to fill out this description, but of course you need to be able to understand where to spot that in the debenture in order to fill out the MR01 form correctly. Another aspect of the form that you need to be able to understand the debenture for is whether there are any fixed charges, floating charges, or a negative pledge. And I think now is a really good time to really quickly explain the difference between those 3 forms of security so that you can then know how to spot them in a debenture. Now we'll look at fixed charges and floating charges first, as they're often spoken about together. Now, as the lender or the person who is taking the security, you are generally going to want majority of your security to be fixed charges, and then you take out a floating charge as a sort of catch-all provision to just protect you in the event of anything else going wrong. What is a fixed charge? Well, a fixed charge is essentially when the lender can take security over a secured asset, and the idea is that if the borrower defaults in terms of repayment to the lender, then the lender can seize said asset that they have taken a fixed security over. So it's going to be things like property, maybe specific types of machinery, anything that is quite easy for the lender to actually be able to take a hold of, to be able to take that value back in terms of the money that they initially lent. What is a floating charge then? Well, a floating charge is the kind of catch-all provision which essentially provides the lender with security over sweeping assets on the proviso that the lender is going to be able to sell those assets to then recover some of the value. So what do I mean by things like that? Well, it's going to be things like stock. Let's say there's a lender who's providing Tesco with a sum of money, and I use Tesco just because it's kind of easier to think about floating charges in this example. The stock that we have in Tesco, so all of the grocery shopping, is the kind of items that the lender is going to be able to take a floating charge over. You can't take a fixed charge over that because, I mean, it's stock. Think about it. How are you going to take a fixed charge over a packet of crisps? But you can take a floating charge over the general stock that Tesco might have, so that in the event that Tesco defaults on any loan that it has taken by this lender, then the lender can try and sell off that stock to make back as much of the money that they are owed as possible. So that is a fixed and a floating charge, and those are both 2 types of charges that you are likely to find in your debenture, so you need to be able to spot it. Now, the third kind of thing that you need to be able to spot in order to accurately fill out your MR01 form is whether there's a negative pledge. Now, this may also be called a negative covenant, because in essence a negative pledge is in fact actually a covenant that is found within a debenture, and all it basically says is that the company who is pledging the assets will purport not to do a particular thing. So we are actually quite fortunate with many English law drafted debentures in a sense that it's normally quite easy to spot a floating charge, a fixed charge, and a negative pledge because they're normally going to be headed with those titles. Now, remember I said that if the particular security document is being governed under another jurisdiction, so it's being governed by other law, we will still have to file an MR01 form if it's an English entity. So it's a registered company at Companies House that is entering into that foreign security document. So you still need to be able to spot these 3 things in a foreign security document so that you can file your MR01 form accurately. Great, so aside from the general trainee tasks in respect of the CP checklist, anything that you have to be doing just to kind of help with security documents or any kind of drafting around that, and then also your MR01 filings, as the trainee, you're also generally just going to be liaising in respect of the CP checklist in general. So that could mean that you need to make sure that you are liaising with opposing counsel to ensure that all of the documents are received if they are the ones drafting, or you have sent all of the documents over to them and that they are all in agreed form on their end if you're the ones responsible for drafting. Also making sure that you're liaising with your client and any other kind of local counsel that you may have present in the deal, depending on how many jurisdictions are involved. So that is a whistle-stop tour of what asset financing is. I hope it makes a lot more sense to you now, and I will be back soon with another explained video. Please do make sure that you like, comment and subscribe, and give me a follow on Instagram if you have anything else that you'd like me to break down for you.